Learning to write on a cake takes time and practice. It's important to get familiar with icing bags and tips, as well as learning to control your arms and hands in order to get the consistency required. You can do this by practicing making lines, curves, and scrolls on a cake board prior to working with actual cakes. When necessary, simply wipe off the board and keep practicing.
We're going to learn to write with a writing tip, but the first thing we want to do is a little bit of practice. We're going to start out with either a clean sheet pan or a board like this, which is best to practice on, that way you can wipe it off. I've got a number 3 or number 4 will work on here, and we're going to just start out by drawing some simple lines. This will give you the feel of pressure and the icing. Isolate a small amount of icing down in the palm of your hand, such as this. If you get too much, it's too hard to write and it becomes kind of squirrely, so just what you're comfortable with down here. I kind of steady the bag with my fingers. You might be able to do it just straight, depending on how steady you are. You might be able to do it without putting your fingers on it for support, whatever you're more comfortable with. We want to try to avoid breaks in it like this, so try to just keep a steady amount of pressure as you go along. Try increasing, making it a little fatter. So basically all I'm doing is just squeezing harder, which is causing the icing to flow out quicker, making a fatter line. You can also practice some wrist movement and kind of do some kind of swirly lines in between. But practice this several times. Make sure your icing is a good consistency. If it's too stiff, you're going to have trouble squeezing this out. If the icing sat in a bag a couple of days, it's going to get airy and you're going to end up with sputtering through here. So make sure it's fresh, smooth icing. This will help you when you're writing and your lines. The quicker you move too, if you go slow, it's going to cause the icing to kind of pile up on you. So as you're squeezing, move at a steady pace and kind of practice getting that straight. If you need to steady the tip, by all means. If not, then just do it straight. This will help you too with the straight lines when you're doing your writing, as you have to write in a straight line. It keeps you from going downhill. Okay, so now that you've learned some pressure and you practice that, we're going to use the same tip, but we're going to practice making some curves and some scrolls and swirls, things like that, which will kind of help you develop a little movement in your wrist and get used to making circular motions versus straight lines. If you want to kind of support your bag with your fingers, go for it. Continuous pressure. You can make these tighter. We can make them fatter. Just want to practice these over and over again. This kind of helps you develop that fluid motion you need for writing. If you're more comfortable with making these patterns without supporting the bag with your other hand, then feel free to do so. Be mindful of the end of your bag up here and where it's at to keep it out of your way. If it's long, it may flop over if you've got it too close and hit your work. And some of these I'm just squeezing harder, some I'm squeezing lighter to get a less heavy pattern. You can also use a larger tip. I would suggest if you're going to start out writing, most average size cakes would probably use a 3 or a 4. If you get too large of a writing tip, it is going to make your writing too big for that cake. So you're going to have to kind of gauge that based on the size cake you're doing. I'm currently using a number 4, and that's the harder I squeeze, I am able to get a bigger pattern with it, and the less I can get a smaller pattern. Same goes with writing. You can squeeze a little harder if you want some thicker lettering, let off if you want it to be a little thinner. I'm going to move down here and just do some scrolls. This is good because this kind of helps you to develop your writing habits. Just try different patterns back and forth to kind of give you the feel of it. And then if you want to get a little more advanced, you can kind of do some fancier patterns like this. The heavier pressure when I start, and I release off and I come down to the board. Start out with heavy pressure, release, and I'm just blending this into the rest of the stem. This is good filler stuff when you're doing decorations on cakes, but this is also going to help give you practice in learning to write and do lines and other patterns on your cake. There again, squeeze harder if you want, let off as you come down. Notice how it gets thinner as I get to the end. I'm squeezing kind of hard here to make the beginning, and then I let off, just blending this in. You can also make some more pieces at the top if you want to make a fancier little scroll. And there you have it. So practicing this over and over again is going to help you get used to the feel of the icing and help develop your skills at writing. So practice this many times before you attempt to write, and especially before you ever attempt to write on an actual cake. Practice this on a board and kind of have planned out what you're going to do so you know ahead of time it's going to turn out in a good result.